9 o'clock, so I figured we might as well get started. Why don't we just go around, just do quick introductions, just so if anybody doesn't know anybody. I'm Denny, I'm the mayor.
Les Delton, longtime resident.
Maria Veach, Orono City Council.
Justin Hager, I'm actually on Orono Park.
Woo-hoo.
Thank you for your service.
And Long Lake and Accessory.
Marty Renna, been in Casco for 30 years.
Dean Ryman, resident of Casco since 1978.
Yes, looking, I've been a resident for 33 years, and I'm in the second term of 20 years for the City of Orono.
And you're over in the Fox Hill neighborhood.
I am.
Awesome.
I'm a 60-year resident, and I'm on Orchard Beach Place.
I'm sorry?
By Forest Lake Bridge.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nicer. Right there.
Just a 4-wedge, 4-iron for me.
Yep, down the road. We share the deer eating our stuff.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. My wife complains constantly about that. As we see them, we've figured out what not to plant anymore, and what to move forward on, and all that kind of stuff. So it keeps it interesting, that's for sure. But anyways, it's pretty much an open forum, so there's no rhymes or rules to it. So if anybody's got some things that they'd like to talk about, I know we have a lot of stuff going on, and if you've read my newsletter, 2024 is going to be a busy year here at the city with all the different things we have going on. The golf course is going to be really, really fun. That's a 100-year anniversary, and we've changed the name back to its original name, which is the Orono Orchard Golf Course, because that used to be an apple orchard. I'm sure everybody probably knows that, but if they don't, that used to be an apple orchard. That's why it's called the Orono Orchard Golf Course originally. Then they changed the name to Orono Golf Course, I don't know how many years ago, but we're going to rebranding it, bringing it back to its original state, and kind of fun stuff. We'll have the new Public Works building, which is going to be opening up in, I think they're thinking they're going to be done because the construction season has been very helpful with not a whole lot of snow. It's at the end of the March, so they're going to probably start moving in it little by little, but by the time it's fully done, we'll probably have a grand opening in, I don't know, May, June, July, something like that. We'll have the grand opening of the fire department, the Orono Fire Department, on July 1st. So sometime in July, we'll have kind of an open house for that and stuff. And then just plenty of other just good stuff that's just generally going on in the city. So that's just a quick prequel, but that was in my newsletter too, I believe. Everybody got that.
Yeah,
So.
we're through. So, as far as the roads, it looks like you're getting ahead of the curve as far as maintenance and the $1 million budget or appropriations.
Well, it's interesting because 8 years ago when I became mayor, we were very behind in the roads. We had no money. We had no money, so we were just hoping and praying for some extra revenue to get our road done. And people would always complain to me that they said, "Hey, but you said you'd get our road done 3 years ago." And I said, when you have no money, you can't make promises, and that's a problem. So we've built up the budget so we can plan. Because back in the day, we've got a board that's about twice the size of the Orono meetings calendar there. That's the whole city. And back then, all the roads are color-coded, and they keep track of it in Public Works: green, orange, yellow, and red. And red is like they are just destroyed. They need a lot of help. Green is they're new or they're relatively new, no problems. Then you got the varying orange and yellow. Well, back then, half the city was red, and we had a lot of orange and yellow. Now the city is almost entirely green, and so now we can be proactive. We can kind of look at stuff in the spring, because that's when we kind of find out if things have blown up a little bit more. And we, as a council, as well as Public Works, are driving all the roads to say what's going to be our next roads for the next season, because we have to plan a year ahead of time. So when we start driving around for the roads, we see the roads in April, May, to kind of make a decision on what we're going to move forward on. But those roads don't get budgeted not until 2025. So the roads that was, I think in the newsletter, that are going to get done this summer were the roads that we did last spring to know what was going on. So we're always, and Public Works does a really good job with our city administrator of cataloging the roads and which ones are starting to degrade a little bit, so we got to keep our eyes on them. And then in the spring we find out if they've gotten uglier in terms of what's going on. And we do have residents from time to time and say, "Hey, have you thought about this road? We have some issues here," but we'll go out and look at it every single time. So
And it looks like with the lack of snow that we've had,
time. We're not using all the salt, so definitely we will, but we also had like the last year, where in the beginning it was slow, and then we just got bombarded. And I know in my business where I own a whole bunch of office buildings, and I have my own maintenance crew and construction crew, we do our own plowing. And I tell you, they're cheering every day when there's no snow. My girls want the snow because they want to go sledding and snowboarding and go to the golf course because the sledding hill is over there as well. But yeah, we got bombarded last year for 2 full months of nonstop, and you catch up really quickly in overtime and all the salt really fast. So it looks good for now. It looks pretty good. So
I talked to DJ at the cleanup in April, and he was saying it got way over budget last year. Because of the excess, what do we have, 96 inches, something like that? So,
I did have a question about the, we had our roads redone, how long it was, and they were nice.
oh,
The construction that comes back and forth on our roads has ripped up our roads. And like, they came through last year and they did the little paper and then tarred over the paper, and now the construction's coming through. Just last week, I walked down Caroline Avenue and they ripped up all that rubber that's up from the construction. Can they be liable, or can anything come out of their pockets to fix when they finish?
I guess it's a little bit of a yes and no. They're public roads.
Right.
So we can't tell people what can or can't get driven down the roads. But typically when we do have construction projects, we kind of have a knowledge of what the roads are before, so if they cause some additional damage that wouldn't have been from normal wear and tear, we will address that. But if you've got something particular that you've noticed, it's always good to maybe take a picture or send an email to me and or Public Works, because if you don't know who is over there and you send it to me, I'll reply and forward it to the right people so everybody sees that, because we obviously want to know that. What's going on as
I've been
well.
working with, I'm not sure who I'm working with, I call somebody at the city because they work with contractors,
Okay,
because I'm right on the corner lot, so I get hit with everything. They drive
Oh,
on my
sure.
property, they, and I had asked, I sent pictures with Scotty Overeem a couple years ago to ask them if they couldn't tar in my corner, because I had the catch basin right there. Well, they even hit the street sign, but they drive over my yard, and
jeez,
so I asked them if they can't tar that in, so that at least I'm not trying to repair mud.
sure.
But Scott said he had to take it to the city council, and I don't know where that went.
Well, yeah, well, DJ is the Public Works supervisor over there, so I don't know if you've had any communication with DJ at all, but they have their own general budget for minor things to be able to get done. They don't need to come to city council unless it's some kind of big issue that's over like $20,000 or there's some number, and I can't remember what it is, it might be 10,000 to get things accomplished, that they would need our signature on that kind of thing. But beyond that, they have what is called a preventative maintenance budget, that they are just constantly filling potholes and doing all those things in general.
Okay. Well, they've been whoever I've been working with is working with contractor. They've got them now parking with more of the bigger equipment.
Okay, good.
The rink, we're on the corner, and then they have a bobcat or something that's bringing the material in and out in on that.
Sure.
Instead of the big trucks, because they just can't turn back on those big roads.
Yeah, and since you're there, I mean, you're gonna see it all the time, so you're gonna have better institutional
I didn't
knowledge.
know that. Take
Yeah,
another
but so
picture, lady.
So it's good to alert us, because if there are problems, and we do have problems, because contractors and everything else, as great as they are, we'll just take the least route that they can, whether it impacts other people or not, because it makes their job easier. So it behooves the citizens and to tell us to help, so we can put those things in order. I know we had that a lot down at Fox Hill in your neighborhood when they were building houses down at the end. They were blocking driveways. We had a whole bunch of different issues that we had to kind of get solved and police a little bit more than normal, but it happens. I mean, we have a lot of, like everywhere else, we've got a lot of tear downs, and that even makes it more complicated, because you're tearing down, there's all these big things coming and going, to get rid of all the dirt, to get rid of all the excess material and everything like that as well.
So should I talk to DJ about the corner?
Yeah, we'll talk to DJ. Yeah, DJ's the head of the department, so anything that would happen essentially would have to come to him at some point.
Okay.
So I would just talk to him directly, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And if you have a problem, feel free to contact me or tag me in an email, because usually if people tag me in an email, it usually kind of gets people's attention a little bit more.
Well, I just think the one at the end of my street, Ethel, is almost done. Now there's one at the end of Caroline, and another one at the very end of Castle Avenue. So I'm gonna be all next summer, have the same thing. They just,
Are the roads under duress more because we haven't had a real
base, it's always a little bit better, because the freeze doesn't go as deep.
Yep.
So the snow base always helps, so sometimes if it gets really cold and there's no snow base, and I know I had this problem in a number of my buildings a number of years ago, we didn't have a lot of snow, but it was really cold. And I had stuff that was 8 feet deep that, where the outlet was for the air, for the water got down there and froze the pipes, and we had to dig in the middle of winter time 8 feet down to get it fixed. And I know a lot of people, the city had problems, they had freezing, they were going much down farther, and so that causes a little bit more havoc. So snow is good from a layer perspective, from that perspective, because it doesn't tend to blow stuff up as much, but we haven't had a whole lot of cold weather at this point, so without cold weather, everything is pretty calm from that perspective. But it's gonna be cold this coming weekend. I see I see the minuses starting to come,
Oh, yeah.
next week, so.
It'll make the red light people happy, so they won't get bad.
Well, I know all the ice houses disappeared on the lake, obviously, a couple weeks ago, because everything turned into water, so it got a little crazy, but I think they're gonna probably start venturing out again. But the problem is, with a little bit of snow covering, you can't see where you're going. You gotta be careful where you step, what you can't see, unless you probably see all those guys. Do they come down that?
Yeah, they're parked at the end of the road. There were just 2 of them there yesterday going out measuring.
Are they? Do they ever get down there with the public works guys to come and look at all that stuff down there in the summer?
Yes, but I haven't followed up with them. But
Okay.
yeah, they followed up with me, but we have to continue. But yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. So I don't know if that answered all the questions. I probably rambled a little bit more about different things, but they're all related in some context, so.
Well, I just want to be complimentary to the city and how they manage our taxpayer money, and the fact that we're one of a handful of cities in the US of 10,000 population that has a AAA bond rating, and that's just not recent. So I think it's a real factor in what we pay for property taxes here versus what people pay in St. Paul, Minneapolis, other
Or just Maple Plain, or Long Lake, even just our surrounding cities.
So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it seems like we've always been fiscally conservative here, and but still, you seem to be making more improvements. Not only
Well, it's been helpful with staff and the finance people to know that when we originally, before I was mayor and I was on the council, a lot of the direction of not having budgets for roads and stuff, people would say, well, and the council was let's just go borrow the money for all that kind of stuff. And I made it very clear that bonding is not for stuff that should be in your budget. It's for like long-term projects, like building a new building. That's what to me bonding is for. Stuff like roads, water and sewer, parks, stuff that you can budget for should be in your budget. So what we did over those 8 years, and it was kind of a vision back then, is let's pay off over the next 8 years all of these proceeds of these bonds that we've got little by little, because they'll all come due and they'll get paid off. But let's then, those payments that we've got in the budget for those, let's reallocate those where they should be, instead of having, say, $500,000 that's going toward interest payments on bonds. Now that those are, let's say that gets paid off, let's take that $500,000 that's reallocated into a budget item that is necessary that we need every year, like roads, or parks, or water and sewer, because the city would always say to us, okay, well, 8 years ago, we need $1 million in our budget for roads, and we have zero. How do we get there? I said, well, we start getting rid of the stuff that is not necessary, and we reallocate those funds. But it takes a council with the same vision over a long period of time, because it's taken a lot of years to do that, to reallocate all those funds correctly. And so what the goal was back then was to keep our tax rate exactly the same and just incrementally get to where we need to be in the budget for all those items. And so it's taken a lot of years, little by little we've done that, and now we're there. And so now it's kind of paid to fruition. And so we did bond for the new public works facility, which is a long-term facility we need. And that facility should take us into the next century for sure, because it's twice as big as the facility we got. The facility we have over here is surrounded by swamp, so you can't expand it, there's nothing really you can do with it. So we'll repurpose that at some point, but the new facility is twice as big. You can actually have enough land there that it's built in for the plan that we can add another 20,000 feet if we need to in the future, if we need it. But there's a number of things that we've done over time that people don't realize either, is that we have brought in things that we didn't do in the past in Orono. Right now, over at Public Works, a number of years ago, the staff came to us and said, you know, we're spending so much money outsourcing, fixing all of our public works vehicles, because we have, you know, inspection vehicles, we've got plow vehicles, we have all sorts of stuff going on. They said we can bring that in-house, not have to wait for a private enterprise with other clients to get to it. And we can get that stuff done right now, whether it's oil changes and everything else. And if there's big stuff that we can't handle, we can always still outsource that, but we'll get to our stuff right away. Well, that's worked so well. In the new Public Works facility, we have our own maintenance shop, complete maintenance shop within the facility, and a facility to bring in trucks and work on them on top of it, as well as all the tools. And so we get to all that stuff, well, but we never had all that stuff before. And we obviously have no place we could put it over there to do that kind of stuff. And it's gotten to be so well, what we've done now in our HR committee that we just met with city staff is we're gonna authorize now, I think we passed it on Monday, we're gonna hire a second maintenance person that's gonna come on, because now we're gonna bring in all of the police vehicles in-house.
That has in the paper.
Yeah, was that in the paper?
Yeah, that was last week's stuff.
Okay, yeah, so we're bringing all of that in-house now because it's worked so well that, and at first, I will admit that Corey said, God, you know, I'm not sure, we got this place we do business with, and they seem to get to it pretty quick. But after a test run that we've been doing this for a few months, they're like, this is amazing. We get the oil changes done immediately, there's no waiting, everything's fixed in-house. And police, they're operating these cars 24 hours a day. You can't afford to have a bunch of police cars waiting in line to get things fixed. Again, if there's something big, we can always outsource that, but what it gives us the ability to do is take care of everything that's an immediate need, we get it taken care of right now. So we have everybody out there when they need to be taking care of the citizens. It's a long-term approach to making sure we take care of things appropriately, because obviously from an Orono City perspective, we want to be the client for ourselves, and that's what we've done, and so then we get it done, we don't have to wait for anybody. So that's just another way of showing that we're, you know, bringing services in-house as things change over time, and it's budget neutral. It makes a lot of difference for us in terms of making good budget decisions. And we have great staff that helps us identify those things as well, so it's not just me or Maria, but as a goal of here's what we want to accomplish over time. And our current city administrator, Adam, has done a great job with our organizational structure of who reports to who. We've got really just detailed really well in all the positions, and it's just all the little things that, you know, aren't sexy. They don't get talked about a whole lot, but the staff, without a really good staff, it would be hard to implement all these things with the vision we want to have, but we've got a great staff too, so we should all be very thankful for the good people we have working here in Orono, for sure.
Great police chief.
And we have a great police chief
And
as
when
well.
you referred to Corey, I was assuming everyone here knew that was our police chief.
Yeah, and he's been our police chief for 20 years. I mean, it's been a long time. He's a true professional, so the best practices all the time, whether it's body cams. You know, it's interesting. You know, you hear all these stories about body cams and the issues with it. Well, the biggest issue that we had with body cams was the storage capacity of all the information, because you have to store videos, and videos that you've got 30 police officers having every single day, and the amount of storage it takes. So we have upgraded our internet here. We have fiber here now at this point, and then we've upgraded our cloud capacity, and there's a lot of rules and regulations on this kind of stuff and how you store it. But we've solved that whole problem. But the police will tell you, at least our police will tell you, that the body cams have been a great thing to have, because what it's done, it's been able to, in whatever court cases or people saying that you did these things or didn't do these things, they're able to go right back to the body cam and say, we didn't do any of that kind of stuff. We didn't do anything you said we did. It's all false and whatever. So it's actually been an exoneration tool of people when they have to go to people's houses and they say you did these crazy things in my house that they can show they did not do. Because our police officers are true professionals. And wouldn't be a job that I would wanna have, that's for sure. I don't worry about looking over my shoulder all the time, so I commend them all the time. And I think, wasn't yesterday, the Law Enforcement Day, the official Law Enforcement Day?
Appreciation.
So, Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and there's something for every day, right?
Everybody gets a
In the
holiday.
United States, right? Every single day has some kind of day, but yesterday's
I
Law
know.
Enforcement
Ah,
Day. So if you do see a law enforcement, tell them thank you for us, for sure. Can't remember what the question was anymore, but.
Well, I think we all sleep well, or I do in this community, for that very fact. I mean, the fact that you have a lot of green space, the lots are big, rather than high-density 15-foot setbacks and row houses in St. Paul, and the crime seems to be East St. Paul, Russell Park, the first-rate suburbs. And I don't know what Southwest Rail is gonna do as far as, hopefully not spreading that kind of those incidents
No, I
to
agree.
the exterior suburbs. But, I mean, I just saw the figure this week, 2.86 now, to complete that, versus the $2 billion.
I saw that
budget
too.
initially, and hopefully it caps at that, and we're all paying for it, with an extra 1% sales tax in the city and or in the Summit County Metro. How long that's gonna ensue after the project's done, but once things like that get implemented, they don't go away.
No, we know how that works, right?
So,
Well, what's interesting to say about the being safe, at our city council meeting this last Monday, a non-resident, somebody who's not an Orono resident, got up and yelled at us about our blue line flag that we fly out there, and we should take it down, and it's just a response to Black Lives Matter, and it was very, he's uninformed from my perspective, because years ago, what we did is, because we have lines of business, from my perspective, in Orono. 3 lines of our business, which are all first responders, are the police, fire, and public works. And so we said, we should be flying our flag that showcases the 3 lines of business that we do for all of our first responders, to show that we support them 100%. And what people don't realize is the blue line flag that's out there and the red line flag are over 200 years old in terms of when they were actually put together. They're official flags of the United States. They show support for the police and support for the fire, and we have the public works flag. But these are not movement flags, they're actually official flags of the United States of America, and they've got a 200-year history. And so we fly those in support. I remember when we put them up, I can't remember how many years ago, I did get some pushback from 2 or 3 residents that said, that's racist, you should take them down, whatever. And I said, we back our first responders 100%. We're not backing down, we're not changing, and it's gonna be there as long as I'm here, for sure. So that's the same statement. And what's interesting too, is Medina, their police officers, they have the blue line flag as an emblem on their uniform. Because these are official United States emblems and flags. So, if anybody hears anything about that, that's the true scoop of what it is and why they're out there. And we're unapologetic about having them.
I heard a thing on the radio a couple of days ago, or a couple of weeks ago, whatever it was, but it was Blois Olson. I don't know if you guys ever listened to WCCO, but Blois Olson's business. I'm not really for it, but whatever, doesn't matter. But political. But he basically said people need to quit waking up in the morning insulted. You get insulted by every little thing. It is what it is. It's how you make it. So I have no problem with what you said. Blue line flag.
So that was just a little more perspective, ever since you brought up law enforcement. And I always got so many things going on in the city, things that we're doing, the reasons why, and they're all positive, and that type of stuff. So
there's still room for the city to grow geographically?
I would say
Housing
that
wise?
very, very small. I mean, we still have some 5-acre lots and 10-acre lots and 2-acre zones or 1-acre zones. So you'll see your onesies and twosies here and there, but if we've got 3,200 homes, generally speaking right now, we're not gonna be 4,000 tomorrow, or next year, or the year after. So our population, I think, generally speaking, will grow just slowly. I know what we have done a little bit over time with the council is changed some codes to kind of try and help people stay in their houses longer. And one of them was that you could build a separate building, let's call it a garage, with an upstairs living area with the shower, with the bathroom. Not for renting, because that doesn't get allowed in a separate structure like that. But for family members. So if you got your kids coming home for college and they need a place to stay for a couple of years so they're still getting their feet underneath them, or you have an older mother, older father, or you got some cousins or whatever, but family members in general, try and get as much use out of your land as you can. The rentals were always just a big issue. As I know, a number of years ago we had, the internet has changed a lot of things with all the VRBOs and some of the other acronyms that you can just go rent properties on. And so obviously being a lake community, lake properties are high end usage for that and demand for that kind of thing. Well, we had people that would just be, whether it's renting it for the weekend, or you have a bachelorette party or a bachelor party, or just a whole bunch of guys who want to party for the weekend, would just come and rent a house and just be parking all these cars up and down. We have no idea who these people are. We had people who had daughters living next door that, the drunk bachelor parties were catcalling the daughters, and that was causing problems. So before any other community really reacted to that, we said, okay, we need to kind of look at solving, how do we solve this? Well, we changed our codes to say that you can rent, but it's got to be a 30-day minimum. There is no more weekend rental. It doesn't mean someone does it to get away with it, but we have outlawed that to do short-term rentals. There's got to be at least a 30-day minimum. You've got to have a lease in place, and you've got to come register as a rental of the city that you're doing that. So then, because part of the problems that we found too is as you unpeel these onions, is when people would rent to the weekend warriors, and it would be a problem. Well, the city's closed, right? I mean, there's no staff here. So then they call the police, and the police goes, "Oh, we don't know what to do. We don't know who the building or the housing owner is because they're just rentals." And so we had this quandary. We didn't know who to call. City staff is so now when people come in and put their rentals in place, they actually have to say who the owner is, how to get a hold of the owner, and who they are. So if there is a problem at some point, city staff or the police has a phone number to call somebody, whether it's too many cars or whatever it happens to be on your third rental. So trying to constantly be proactive on minimizing issues in neighborhoods, because we are a Lakeshore community and we have a lot of Lakeshore, on top of giving residents more opportunity to help people stay longer in their properties with other family members, I guess we'll just call it in general. So I don't know if that's probably more than what you asked, but there's always more tentacles to the conversation, so.
I think California's moved into that direction. I mean, much more high density, but have allowed outside structures for that very reason.
Oh,
And
no,
because of the cost.
Yeah. Well, here's what's scary, and I think I brought this up this summer, was that the legislature was looking at passing a bill that outlawed single-family zoning. Outlawed single-family zoning,
yeah.
which means that we as a city would not be able to prohibit someone, say, buying my house and converting it into a duplex or a triplex. We wouldn't be able to tell them no, essentially. Which then essentially what it does is, well, first of all, it makes your property worth a lot more because you can build and house more people, but it increases density. It brings people who don't own into your neighborhoods everywhere potentially. And so we made everybody aware as much as we could. We sent a letter to our representatives saying we do not agree with this. It takes local zoning out of the city council's hands that actually manage and do the zoning in our own city, which we find is extremely important to have our own control over our own zoning and the way things work and the way things live. Because I know when we first ran, people said, we like Orono the way it is. We don't want it to change. And we said, we agree. So I think in the 8 years we have not let anybody change any zoning in their property. We haven't changed density. We haven't changed height. And it took a few years for developers to stop coming with things that we told them weren't going to work, because they would just get mad when we told them, no, we're not going to change this because this is the way it is. And if you don't want to develop a property, then don't develop the property. We're okay with that. But if you're going to, you got to follow these rules, and they've been in place forever. They're good rules. We nip and tuck a little bit here and there in terms of the smaller lots and some of the issues they might have with setbacks, but beyond that, that's about it, but we've held fast to that, so we don't have anybody coming with requests that don't follow the rules anymore.
How does that change the overall comprehensive plan for the city? Because I know 30 years ago when I looked in what your comprehensive plan was for my area where I bought, I think there was talking about controlling the water runoff to the lake. And I know in the plan, there was talk of running a culvert of some sort that ran from my property and then 3 down from the lake. So they were gonna put in culverts between the 2 property lines all the way down to the lake. And it's on the plan, so 30 years forward, nothing ever happens. Where is all of that kind of old stuff versus new stuff? You change that?
No, not really, we really haven't changed anything. The only thing that we've had to change, or that we've had to change in the comprehensive plan, is the amount of density that we will allow, because the Metropolitan Council dictates to us. And there's a little bit of negotiation, because they dictate to us how many new housing units we have to allow in our city. So I think, a number of years ago when we did the comprehensive plan, I think we had to add another 250 units in our city somewhere. Well, our mantra as the city at that point, from a council, is we're not gonna put density in neighborhoods. So what we did is we put it along Old Highway 12 here, because we had a lot of this land where you see the, I don't know what we'll call it, the old folks home, but the senior facility over here, and where the new housing is in the corner of Willow and 12, all those things were all zoned office buildings back in the day. And nobody's building any office buildings here, that's why the land's been sitting here for decades, right? And so we saw an opportunity to say, okay, well, let's just repurpose that. We're not gonna change heights, all that kind of stuff, but we're gonna repurpose it into residential. Obviously, it's gotta be multifamily, or not, it's gotta be a little bit denser than just putting a house there, because we had to add 250 units somewhere. So we added it along this corridor, but not changing the heights. In fact, the one that's in the corner of Willow and 12, they wanted, I think, twice as much density, and we said, no, you have this project right across the street. We want it to look like that, so you don't have these weird anomalies kind of next to each other. It needs to look like that, it needs to fit into the neighborhood, height-wise, all that stuff. And so to their credit, they came back, and they brought it back from, 80 units down to like 25 or 30, and they said without 30, they said they can't even, it just won't work. So we said 30 will work, because they brought it and did exactly what they needed to make it look like. So now we have projects that look like it fits in the neighborhood. But that's what we did, is we changed all that so there's no additional density in any other residential neighborhood in Orono. And what the Met Council does on the next comprehensive plan, I don't know, but they're the complicating factor, because White Bear Lake, I think it's White Bear Lake. Maybe it's not White Bear, it's the city that's just to the east of, no, it's the east of White Bear Lake. It's a city out there.
Sunfish?
Challenged the Met Council and says, we're not gonna put this density in because you can't tell us what to do. And for 5 years they litigated that, went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, you have to do what the Met Council says. So that's already been taken off the table, so we don't have a choice anymore. So that's the only thing that will complicate things in the future, is what the Met Council dictates. The only other thing that Met Council dictates from a density perspective is the sewer system. So we have to, every city has to keep above a threshold of an average of 3 units per acre on your sewer system, in terms of what they designate. And we hover right around 3 all the time, because we don't wanna go up to 4, we can't be below, because they won't approve it. So when we do these new developments, they look at right away how many you're adding, in terms of how many acres you have, because there's been a few developments that have come to us that are zoned 1 acre land, and they're 10 acres. So you could add, once you put a driveway in, probably 8 or 9, that they only wanted 2. Well, we gotta go look at our calculations to see if we have the capability to do that. Because if they're connected to sewer, which they are, we have a responsibility and an obligation to the Met Council, which we cannot dictate from. And when we go, let's say we're at 3.8, and by doing that, we go down to 3.2. Well, we have to go to the Met Council to still get approval for that, and they've never said no as long as we're above 3. And so that's just another formula issue we always have to work with from a density perspective, but we've always said, we will take every day to take 8 down to 2, because we like, the open volume system of trees and greenery more than trying to squish people in. Long Lake has opened up the Pandora's box. They put in 3 humongous projects down there with huge. Their population is going to increase by 10% in 1 year. That'd be like adding 800 units in Orono. And they've gone up higher than normal. They made a lot of exceptions, but once you do that, you kind of let the cat out of the bag. It's hard to put it back and say, I know we did it for him, but we're not going to do it for you. We as a city can't do that, so you got to learn to know how to hold the line really well, whether it's on density, height, setbacks, all that stuff, because everything sets you up for the next thing coming. And people will say, well, I'm going to sue you if you don't give me permission to do what I want to do, because you just did it for Dennis.
I've already spent Parkville when they added all those condos, and they tore the mist.
Oh, when they tore the mist down?
They had a.
Oh, they obviously added a whole lot of people. And Spring Park obviously has a lot of apartments and a lot of condos in their jurisdiction, so they have a lot more density and things to deal with, especially when it comes to short-term rentals, because they have apartments and all that other stuff, so they have different issues. But what was interesting is once we put those regulations in place for short-term rentals, a whole bunch of other cities around us followed suit, because they saw, oh, this makes sense, and Orono's gonna do it. So we kind of see ourselves as a little bit as a leader in kind of helping do those things. We did it with the sex offender ordinance that we put in place too, because there were some issues with being able to bring level 3 sex offenders out. So we had to change all that, because we never had to deal with that before. All of a sudden it happens. Like, okay, all the other cities fell right into place too. But you always have to be careful when you put these things in place too, because if you get too overzealous, where you put something in place where essentially bars everything, well, that's going to get challenged. So we have a fabulous city attorney who is, we defer to him on a conservative basis of, we don't want to go over the line because we don't need to go there, but let's find something that makes sense. Typically, we're not creating the wheel on these things. The wheel's already been invented. We're not inventing the wheel. So let's look at what other people are doing, what's been challenged, let's put the most protections we can in for our citizens, and let's go with that. And every time we've done that, and every single ordinance we've done, anybody who's challenged it, we have won. So we've been doing well in terms of doing it correctly up front, and that's, I think, the important part, so you don't get challenged and have to go back to the drawing board, because that never looks good. So, Dennis.
As one that volunteered in 2019 to work on a comprehensive plan, I can tell you that the grasp, the concept of how that is guiding, it's a 20-year comprehensive plan. So in 2019, we reviewed the documents that were prepared by the city for the city 20 years earlier. So there were some changes, there were some redundancies, there were some things that really don't exist in our current platform, but it was insightful to be able to look at the zonings that you just referred to, especially with density, knowing what the Met Council would expect and ask, and then look at these quite detailed maps of the zoning, and look at that, literally for hours to figure out how we could best comply, but yet do the best thing for the citizens of Orono in the long run, because 20 years is quite a long time.
And we had a large group that worked on that comprehensive plan. We had like 10 or 15 people for a year that were volunteers that helped us go through all the different chapters, because it's like this thick, and it's a lot of stuff. But one of the biggest changes that we made, I don't know, maybe it's not the biggest change, but one of the common sense changes that we made that sometimes people vocalize about and try and demonize us on is the whole thing about Lakeshore access. Because in the old comprehensive plan, it said Lakeshore access, you could not work on anything that had Lakeshore access, you had no flexibility, the answer is no. It said that in the comprehensive plan. And so we took that language, and it was like in 2 or 3 different places. And we said, we are going to give the city the flexibility to look at everything on a case-by-case basis when it comes to lake access pieces. Because there's a lot of weird lake accesses that people would call lake accesses, but they're old fire lanes, they're old streets from 100 years ago that never existed, all these weird plats. The perfect example of this, and I bring it up all the time because it's probably the most relevant one, is in Forest Lake. Forest Lake back in I think it's 1915, when they put the dam in, the water level was 15 feet lower. So people don't realize that, 15 feet lower, okay? So back in the day, before this, we're going back 100 plus years, right? But in Forest Lake, there was barely any water in Forest Lake, and so developer platted the entire lake bed that is underwater right now into a development with streets, cul-de-sacs, all this kind of stuff. And if you go there today, it's still on the GIS on Hennepin County, you can see it all. And so over the years, over the last 100 years, and then once the water rose, obviously there's no development, but the plat's still there. Over the years, a lot of, probably 95% of all the old alleys and fire lanes that don't exist to anything have been vacated as things have gotten built over 100 years. Well, we've had a few that have come to us that have said, well, one guy we actually alerted and said, you bought a Lakeshore property, but the problem is you don't own any Lakeshore because the lot that's in the lake that's under the water owns the first 3 feet of your Lakeshore. And he was just beside himself because he's like, oh my God. So technically, he couldn't resell his house with Lakeshore. In fact, he's not even allowed to put a dock on, technically. So we as a city said, okay, well, since all this stuff came back in the city, was that we will just, you will pay for it, but let's recreate the plat for your piece of ground, and we'll just deed you that because that's really your property. We've also had fire lanes that have come to us, or old streets that have come to us that go down that have never been made from 100 years ago, and they said, there's no relevance to this, there's a whole bunch of true lake accesses around here, we don't need 5 lake accesses, 2 is probably plenty, and so we've looked at these on a case-by-case basis, and we've vacated some of those old fire lanes, because people still have the misconception too, that the fire trucks will use fire lanes to go get water from the lake. Well, that hasn't happened for 40 or 50 years now. It doesn't exist.
Not how you do it.
They have tankers, they have water tankers now, they don't take water from lakes. It doesn't exist. So the fire lanes, if they're true fire lanes, maybe back in the day they did that, but they don't do that anymore. So we have done that. We probably vacated pieces like that, old alleys, etc. Probably, I don't know, 2/3 of the time. 1/3 of the time we said, yeah, no, that's still a good lake access, and the next one's not even close, so we're still going to reserve that. But at least what it gave people was the opportunity to come to us and make their argument about why this piece of property doesn't make any sense to be between our properties anymore. But we've gotten demonized as giving away land, and a fire lane is not giving away land, an old alley is not giving away land when we have easements. We may be getting rid of the easement, but we're not giving them the property. But it is cleaning up stuff that nobody in the past had an opportunity to clean up from stuff that was done 100, 110, 120 years ago that causes problems and titles, and people come into your front yard and decide to sit down and have a sandwich. And this stuff happens, so this is the weird stuff that happens in old communities with weird alleys and all that kind of stuff. So that's a long piece for the comprehensive plan, but that was just kind of one that we knew made sense to give us the capability to look at things on a case-by-case basis.
Well, I've seen some of them have been absorbed, and I see houses then take care of them. I see some that are labeled public walking, which I like, because then you can actually walk down. My house is deeded for, I have 10 feet of, a 10-foot walking path, down 10 foot, and I can put my rowboat and I can bathe in the shore. That's my deeded access on my property, which is,
Shared with 40 others.
shared with 40 other homes. So they're just waiting for probably all of us people to go so that they can get rid of all of that. I wonder about that, because it's one house down on the Castle Point Road that has 40 houses attached to that
Wow.
deed.
Well, we found out a number of weird things. Well, Crystal Bay Road, this is old Crystal Bay Road, but there's Crystal Bay Road, which is by Lafayette, and you go down and it's literally just right by the lakeshore, and you go in front of everybody's houses. Well, a resident called me one day and said, hey, we did our title work on our property, and we found that you have this easement in front of us that shouldn't be there because that legally it shouldn't be there. And I had our attorney look at it, and he goes, you're right. He goes, but what I found out is that road is not a public road. that road is a private road, and we've never known. This is only just a few years ago, we've never realized that that's a private road, that the road is owned by like there's 70 plots of land down there, 1/70th is owned by every single person down there. And so we obviously called the person back and said, you're right, we don't get an easement, but we have water and sewer underneath the road, and we don't have easements for that either, so it's a weird situation. Then we also had another situation, Big Island is obviously very unique because it's an island. And we had restrictions that you could not give somebody deeded access to the lake through another person's property. That was just illegal, because otherwise I could just start selling deeded access on my house to a whole bunch of people and make a bunch of money. You'd have a whole bunch of people just walking through my yard, going down and bathing or putting a rowboat in, right? But we had a lot, but at Big Island, if this is Big Island, there's a bunch of people that are in the middle of plots of land that don't have any ability to actually get there without going through somebody else's property. So we made an exception to the rule only when it's an island that's dealing with, that you can give somebody deeded access to the lake so they can actually dock and actually get to their house or whatever they've got up there. Because it all came about because a lady was trying to sell her property, and she was selling it with deeded access, but the problem is she did not have deeded access. But she had a dock down on somebody else's property forever, and that's how she did it, but technically she couldn't sell it as access. And so we helped solve all that, and so now in the future they have that capability to solve their problems over at Big Island. But sometimes we don't realize these things until somebody runs into these problems. We had a problem, and we back 8 years ago formed a committee called the Code Review Committee, and we had, I think Dennis, you were on that, we had like 7 or 8 builders and realtors that said, what can we do to make our code simpler, to get away from Orono and bring a little more yes to Orono, right, to make it simpler for people. And so we had a whole bunch of weird codes, and that also tapped into permitting, which was not online at the time. And you had 4 people who needed to sign off on your permit. They'd have to go from one desk, you have to wait for them, you have to bring it to the next desk, and it could be days and days, and permits were taking weeks and weeks and weeks when they shouldn't. And so now that it's online, everybody gets it all at the same time, which is really nice. And I can't remember what I was talking about now.
Case by case.
Case by case. So I had a specific example now, and I lost my train of thought. But I get so many examples of all these things that they get lost in fog
So
sometimes.
the Met Council comes to you and says you have to have so many housing units. Do they stipulate that some of it has to be mixed use and or Section 8 or anything like that?
No.
No.
And I've always told everybody too, and hopefully this is not lost on me from a financial standpoint, but anybody can come out here anytime and build a Section 8 housing facility or an affordable housing facility. And you ask, well then why don't they? They want the tax credits. If they wanted to really come out and do affordable housing, somebody could come out here, buy this chunk of land on the corner, build something and rent it out for half of what they would need to. Just to afford, but do they do that? No. They do it because it's about the money. They come out because they want the tax credits, and typically you need the city to sign off that they support you getting the tax credits, and we've told people we won't sign anything like that.
Cool.
So if they really wanted to, and they had a lot of money, like some of these organizations do, they could come and build something and rent it out for half, but they don't, because it's about the money, it's not about the program. Financially, that's really how it works. There's nothing can stop anybody from coming and building something like that. Getting the tax credits to make it a really good investment is the issue.
Tax credits from the state then, as far as reduced property taxes?
And tax credits for selling, you can sell, because what they do is they get the tax credits for doing Section 8 or affordable housing, and what they do is they go to the market and they sell those tax credits, so those tax credits might be worth $1 million, which then writes down the value of the facility, which then, so when you have less value, then you can rent it for less. But they don't do it without getting the tax credits. But if they were really altruistic, you would think that they would just come and do that because they're just great people.
controversy among the population and on the internet in particular about some of these vacated properties that were in the last 2 years possessed errantly or because of backroom deals or whatever. And I can tell you with my 35 years of experience working with the state and as a real estate professional and a couple of terms as a planning commissioner, these things are absolutely without any merit whatsoever. They are false, they're hearsay, conjecture, and rumor that have no basis in fact or rule in law. And I think it's important because I think that that kind of hearsay and conjecture, especially when it's misinformation, can affect important things that we all have duties to, like elections.
Yeah, social media is a tough one these days because it has changed the whole course of how information gets out, and it's exploded over the number of years. But what it's done is it's just made a lot of people that have, there's no ramifications for people come out and just putting out misinformation and complete false information. Here's an example because you bring up the golf course. Someone said the other day, "Oh my God, you're cutting trees at the golf course. You're going to be redeveloping the golf course." And it's like, no, this is just standard tree management. We've got trees that 20 years ago were planted 8 feet apart and looked great, but 20 years later they're killing each other. And you gotta prune, you gotta cut back. There's diseased trees. People also don't realize that the greens, all of them, need the morning sun to survive. And greens are incredibly expensive to repair, let alone replace. And so if the trees get too tall and they start shading out all of the sunlight from the greens in the morning, it's going to kill the greens. And that's a huge undertaking. So you either got to prune back that tree or you got to cut it down. That's just course management. You go to any course and they're cutting down trees and pruning all the time. Do they put up new saplings here and there? Absolutely. But it's just standard course management. The people that we have that work, Josh, our park superintendent, they all have very forestry expertise. They bring in forestry expertise, so this stuff is not done, just on a whim. This is all very thoughtfully planned out because we want all of our courses and our parks to look as best as possible all the time. But it does take management.
I saw just social media. I came to a couple of these meetings, just a couple, and I had some questions I had, and I couldn't get a word in edgewise because one person took over the whole meeting the whole time and talked over everybody. It made me so angry that I went and took all the information so I could come back and be informed over the arguments because I couldn't. But it was so much misinformation that was being thrown out, and it made me angry. And that was just right here in this meeting.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think that's what I brought up at the last meeting is a lot of people will say, write or call or here's some information, you should do this. Well, the people saying that, one, aren't writing, they're not calling, they're not asking questions. And again, a public forum like a city council meeting is not a conversation. It is by process, by design, everywhere in the US, it is you talk, then we talk. It is not a time for conversation and sometimes not the best to get information. Just like one gentleman came this week and wanted something about a light, like a light to be redirected so it's not shining in the window. Great, here's an email. That's how you get it done. It's not coming to the council, which I thought Adam, again, handled brilliantly and said, here, contact me, I'll get it handled. But I think it's just misinformation on how communication is needed. I think that some people are just scared. Face-to-face conversation is hard for some people and it's intimidating, but I do think at the day, that's why I think the council, from my short experience on it, works so well with city staff. And to not understand how that relationship works and not understand how the process works, you're gonna be left feeling frustrated, I think, and that's where the frustration comes.
It's unfortunate that we've had people come and yell and scream and just be crazy here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Because this is better more for just conversation and perspective, and sometimes I even tell Les, Les, email me, I'll get this set up, and Les followed up, emailed me, next thing you know, we're down at his place and we're kind of figuring it out, because that's our job. But sometimes it's hard when you get people who want to take over conversations and yell, and we get that at the council, public
This was
comments.
refreshing because I wanted to come back one more time and just see if it was going to be like this every time, and then be prepared with something that I could back up. Those are not true statements, because I didn't know what this person was saying was true or not. So then it was bothering me to think, well, is this really what's happening? Am I, glass skeptic the guy? So this was nice to be able to listen to people.
I hate to monopolize, but I'd
That's right, you did say you had a golf course question.
No, I think that was great, because I think we actually had a question.
My own identification, because I live very near the golf course, and it's kind of dear to my heart because I worked as a volunteer 2 years ago with the park commissioner for some golfer appreciation function, something that I thrive at, and I happen to be a former actor and a professional musician. I'm well connected in the music industry, so when they wanted to have live music, I contacted somebody, kind of vetted them through the park commissioner, and they engaged them, and it was a wonderful, pleasant afternoon of music and a lot more golfers than normal, and one of the local restaurants was engaged to come out and serve food. It was a really wonderful,
That was really fun.
experience. So, I'm also kind of a architectural historian, and that building is so unique. The clubhouse is a Sears kit home.
It's a Sears kid home, but people don't realize that.
And then, eventually it landed, and the house was donated to the city. So, there was, again, hearsay, conjecture, rumor, and postulation about the fact that the city of Orono was up to some dirty deeds and was gonna develop the land. I spoke to an arborist after I made a visit to the golf course a week ago, and I talked to the recent club manager, nice lady that was there. She said people have been driving by constantly all day since this online article came out about the fact that the city of Orono was gonna develop the golf course. She said, Dennis, that's not gonna happen. She said, you could talk to, you mentioned the guy you mentioned earlier that made the grounds.
Josh.
Josh, who I worked with before. And she said, you'll find that none of that really is true. Nothing is in the plan. So then I cross-checked with staff here and found out that there has been, for a significant amount of time, several years, a master plan to put a pavilion. When I say pavilion, I'm talking about a 20 by 40 picnic structure.
Like a lean-to, a big lean-to.
Well, and I'm very familiar with this because I also volunteered for the redevelopment of the Big Island Legacy renovation of the Orono Nature Park there. And that facility that was put there was all ADA compliant. So anyone of any ability could come and have a picnic and be in a shelter, whether it was raining or too sunny or whatever. And to me, that kind of improvement and that kind of improvement is not development, it is an improvement. It's a capital improvement. These are impervious structures like you put on Big Island. So is that the kind of thing that they're
Well, I think you've said it correctly. We vetted a master plan many, many years ago because I had championed the whole knowledge of, I said very clearly from a long time ago, we're never getting rid of the golf course. It's a community asset. We're just gonna work at making it better for the citizens. And we wanna see if we can get more use out of it too, whether it's wedding parties or birthday parties or corporate get-togethers. We expanded the deck because the deck used to be very small. We expanded the deck so you could have picnic tables up there, some live music if you wanted to, etc. And so the Orono Lions, if anybody's familiar with the Orono Lions, came to us and said, we built this great structure for Long Lake down at, I think, Nelson Park, 20 years ago, this great lean-to pavilion. And it's still there to this day, and it's widely used by everybody. They said, we would like to help you get that accomplished. That's on the master plan, because master plans are a 10-year document typically, at least, because you still got to find funds for all these things, whether it's the really nice fire pits or whatever it happens to be. And so they came and said, you know what? We've got guys who are construction guys who can donate their labor. We have money we can donate. We can get stuff for cost, and we'd like to come and build this thing for you with as little cost as possible from the city. Because we figured to build a pavilion, not unlike what we built at Big Island, would be about $85,000. And the Lions guys said, we could get it done for half, probably even less than that, with just materials, free labor, etc. And so they called me about that, and I said, I will be glad to bring you to meet Josh, and then you guys can get something organized and bring it to the Parks Commission and see if you can kind of get this thing through, because we obviously have the 100-year celebration coming up this summer with the renaming and all that kind of stuff. And so if we can get that done before then, it'd be great. So they were the ones who did that. It has nothing to do with being for them, and they can only use it. It's a public asset. It's a public amenity whether it's the golfers want shelter because it's raining or whatever it happens to be, right? It's just an open air pavilion. So that's kind of what's going on with that, and that will be a great boon. But that just shows the public-private partnerships that we've done for years here in Orono, that we encourage, whether it's grants, donations, people providing labor for free, whatever we can bring in, because government shouldn't be the answer, in my perspective, for everything. It should be a joint venture with everybody together all the time. And we've done that and many different times over the last 8 years of me being mayor. And this is just another example of that, but it has nothing to do with developing. It's just hyperbole, just for whatever particular reason. But that's what the scoop is on that. So the Orono Lions, to their credit, is the ones who have just stepped up out of the blue. And they're also the ones who have, I don't know if you guys have come to our Christmas lighting, tree lighting ceremony, where we've got the fireworks and lighting the tree and all that kind of stuff. But they're the ones who are serving all the brats and the hot dogs and bringing them and putting up the tent and doing all that stuff. So they are great people in the community, etc. Which brings up another funny point, because we have 2 or 3 years ago we bought this really beautiful tree, and we went to the top up by the clubhouse, where the highest point is, to put this tree, put all the lights on because it just had this great perfect shape. Well, the tree died. First of all, because it's at the top of the hill, so that we don't have any water up there, and it didn't survive on its own. So of course people said, "Oh my God, we're tree hating people. That's why we're cutting it, because we hate trees." Now, the tree died. The tree died, and so between staff and the Parks Commission figured, you know what, the best thing that we can put up there that will be permanent, we know we'll never have any problems because we don't have any irrigation. We're just going to put this great tree-like structure with a metal pole. It'll be there, and we don't ever have to worry about it. It's going to be there in perpetuity, unless somebody runs it over. But I don't think the golf carts will be able to do that. We have enough golf cart problems that people do on there, but I'm not worried about the pole. But it was beautiful, but it's one of those no good deed goes unpunished. Tree died, and we figured let's put a permanent solution in, and then they say we hate trees. No good deed goes
The
unpunished.
arborist
Right?
did mention that several of the trees that were brought up as controversy in some of the hearsay online, those actually were trees that really needed to be called.
Well,
Well,
there was ash trees too. Yeah, there was ash trees that were diseased.
Ash borer problems further outside of the golf course.
Well, with that said, I have another meeting I gotta go to somewhere else. I don't know if Maria wants to stay around, or if anybody wants to stay around and just chat. The room is open to the public, so you can stay here as long as you'd like. If you do have any further stuff you want, you can always call me, you can email me. I always follow up, and I'm always available. So thank you for coming again today.
Thanks for hosting.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And we still got coffee and donuts over there.
Hi, didn't introduce myself.
Sorry,
Maria.
any question is.
Maria, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Do you come often?
No, I was